Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is a list. I have a list. Now, I don't normally need a list. This still works, well, reasonably well, I think. But yeah, lots of little items to get through, some of which will be done at quite a pace, some of which I'll have to take the camera down off the tripod for, but initially a look at a specific plant type request I've done with a list, and I've got some of them out. Some of them I'll have to get the camera down for. So we're back to normal now. We can drink our coffee without, and it stays there, which was a problem. It's no longer a problem. It's gone, over and done with. 2 days of not too well. I don't very often get the chance to say things personally like this. Thanks to the subscribers, new people to the channel, hope you're liking what you see. And if you have requests for a type of video or video about a certain subject, leave them in the comments. If you have to, you can use my email address, which is in the description of all the videos. But I'm not very good at emails. They can take quite a long time to get an answer to. Whereas a comment, you'll get an answer within 24 hours, even if I have to look it up. So the comments are the best way to sort of chat, if you know what I mean. Sometimes my emails don't get looked at for a week, and then people think that I haven't got them and all that. Anyway, thanks to the subscribers. Thanks for those who follow the videos. And another thank you, which is often neglected on YouTube channels that are monetized, thanks for those who bother to watch the adverts. It's how I get paid. If the adverts are skipped, nobody gets paid. Yeah, so it's, I won't say it's important, it's still a personal choice. If you don't think you ought to watch the adverts because you don't agree with it, then skip out of them by all means. But YouTube's got a new idea now. Instead of one advert, we get 2 short ones. And sometimes one of them's not skippable, so you don't get a choice. But from my point of view, certainly when I'm watching other people's videos, there's a limit to how long the advert is. It depends whether I'm going to watch it. Up to about 30 seconds I'm okay with. It helps support the channel, the person who's doing the work, basically. So I'm happy with that. Much longer than that I'm probably going to skip. But YouTube mainly puts on short ads now. I don't have ads in the middle of my videos, as you know. I don't do that, apart from the little banner ones that you see. You're just like a little oblong at the bottom. Those are allowed, but certainly not actual, presentation type adverts. It spoils the flow of a video, in my opinion. I know some do it, I don't. And also thanks to the people supporting the Facebook group. Do you know that it's going so well, I don't hardly have to do anything apart from going in and approving the new members and approving the posts so that everybody can see them, because they sit in a queue otherwise. I don't really have to do much. When I get new blooms and things, obviously I'll post myself, but at the moment it runs quite nicely on its own, which is good. There's only so many hours in the day, as they say. Now I've got some items on here that are outstanding from the last time I asked for ideas. They may not get done today. Right, the first one, somebody asked me about a certain oncidium that I haven't got, but we've sort of agreed that we think whoever it was meant this one, which is in fact a twinkle crossed back with Sotoanum. So it's a twinkle cross. I mean, a twinkle's a cross anyway, Sotoanum being one of the parents. But this is a named one. I'll see if I can pronounce it. It's Siku Marguerite Chiansi Glory. That's its actual name on it. And as far as this one is doing, it's sulked a bit after being repotted, as is often the case. Well, the sulk isn't just the repot. It's come from a nursery. It's travelled. It's had all those hardships, then it comes into a new environment, and then it gets repotted. So you can understand the plant having a bit of a sulk. But this one's chucking up a lot of new growth, so it's coming on. We've got 1, 2, little one down in there, 3, 4. There's 5 new growths on that little plant. That nearly doubles its size, so it's coming on quite nicely. It's not going to bloom until those new growths mature, and being a type of twinkle with Sotoanum in there twice, effectively, the spikes will take an awful long time. It was in bloom when I got it, so I don't know how long, but it's doing okay. pleased with that one. Now I've got to find places to put stuff. I'm suffering at the moment. I've got a little aphid outbreak. I know exactly where it flipping came from. It came off these brassicas I got from Burnham's, and Sarah apologised. She said, I've been trying to get rid of these aphids, but I'm losing the battle. I'm winning the battle. And the way to deal with aphids, I've found, in the simplest form, is rubbing alcohol in a fine spray. Because they die easy. You know, you could wash them off under the tap. They're very easy to kill. And the alcohol in a fine spray normally leaves the blooms alone, because they're on the blooms basically, they're not on the plants. So that can work without damaging the blooms, because it evaporates so fast it doesn't really do any damage to anything. But I wouldn't recommend doing that sort of thing on blooms if it's cold, because this could take longer to evaporate. So that's what I use for aphids, because I can't be bothered to mix up a proper spray, and that's overkill for aphids, quite honestly. I could just put some water in a spray bottle and hold the plant, you know, somewhere where I'm not going to wash them onto something else, and just spray them off. They just knock off easy, so not a big deal. Right, so that's the twinkle thing. Now I'm going to have to cross these off or I'll end up doing things twice. Right, somebody asked how Golden Rialto was doing. It's growing. That's all I can say. From a plant that was virtually lost, I can't remember why, I got a feeling this one had a bacterial rot on the bulbs and they started to melt, and I've managed to save it. I think that's what happened. And at the time I had one saved old bulb with no leaves and one tiny little growth which didn't grow to its proper size, but it now has a nice strong new growth pushing out, and it also, probably more importantly, has a pot full of roots. So yeah, doing okay. Golden Rialto, that's an Odontoglossum in its true form. Would now be called Oncidium, no doubt, but right, so that's that one, Golden Rialto. I class that as one of my rescue Oncidiums, most of which are Odontoglossums, or were once, till those men in white coats got at it. Right, I was asked about this one that I can never remember the name of, so I wrote it down, didn't I? This is Mediocalcar decoratum. It's a very miniature type of plant, and it was a free gift from the Speciotic Plants on eBay when I bought my last couple of plants. I forget what they were now. One of them was aggregatum, that's Lindley now, it's not aggregatum anymore. So this is growing from a couple of tatty little pieces that I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know if it was an orchid. But it does actually look, see, these are either side shoots or they could be buds. I won't say it's growing well. I mean, this is a cool grower from a montane forest arena. Well, nothing that comes from those areas is ever going to do that well for me, not through the summer months anyway. I've got it in the shadiest, well, a slightly more shaded and my coolest area. But this is one that would probably be in very high humidity constantly. Yeah, but it's growing. You know, something I thought I was just going to mount to watch die is actually growing. So a little story there. When I went to the Burnham's 70th anniversary, in their private area where you're not allowed, some people get special permission, they had one of those in what I would call a garden basket. Those baskets that are bowl shaped, you know, and you line them with moss and put your plants in and hang them out in the garden and water them forevermore. That type of basket, probably about 14 inches across, and you couldn't see the basket. It was absolutely covered, so it was like a dome across the top and the whole of the basket was covered. I'd love to see that in bloom when it does. I don't know what time of year that one blooms. Mine may do one day. Right, but it's growing. It didn't die, which I expected it to, I must admit. Right, individual plants. Where are we going now? Let's do this one. This was a request to have a look at my Dendrobium tortilli. Now this was a present from Alberto, and it didn't like its journey along with the other one I had, which was a Miltonia. But basically it had two little kikis on it which I took off and planted. Those are still actively growing, or one of them is. That one I think's finished now. This one's still actively growing over here. Still got a new leaf coming. Both the kikis have pushed out roots, and the main plant also pushed out a couple of little growths. The actual main cane on it just rotted and had to be cut off. So this is what's left. I won't say it's growing well, but it's growing. It's alive and it will push on eventually. Now that it's growing some new roots, it should get going a bit better. So that's that one. I was lucky that I found that one, because I've got several dendrobiums that look very similar that are mounted, and most of them haven't got any tags on. Luckily that one has. Right, what else have we got? My Neophanesias next. Let's get those two out of the way. This is the one I attempted to pot traditionally. So it's on a mound of moss, which is hollow inside. It's produced a lot of roots since it was put that way. The spike's just going over now. This did actually bloom. It may push out some more spikes this year. It seems to be happier where it is now. There's quite a few leaves are starting to die back on it, but the actual fans are growing quite nicely. And I'll show you what I mean. I don't know whether you're going to be able to see it. If you look at this leaf and follow it down, hang on, let's come back a bit, or you definitely won't see it, and try and find, there we go. If you follow that leaf down, you'll see some little white specks. That could be scale, it could be mealybugs, but whatever they are, they're dead. Things that are small, that haven't got a shell on them, are not going to take the alcohol. It soaks into them and then evaporates so rapidly they're just totally dehydrated. They're left with zero moisture in their bodies, so they die. But this did have scale at one point, quite bad, and it was treated with the systemic, which in the main seems to have done the job, but I still have to keep my eye on it. So that's one. Let's put that back where it goes, because it drips. Where it gets a lot of water for the moss, I let the water soak in the tray to keep the clay pot moist, which helps it keep cool. Now the other one isn't doing well. When I went to repot this, it was so rotten it fell apart into pieces. I didn't have to split it, it just fell apart, and I thought I'm probably not going to save it. But I planted some pieces, trying it on a mount, because if you've got some rot in a plant, under normal circumstances, it's because it's stayed too wet, or too wet and too cold. A combination of the two is not good. But I thought, to make sure it dries out thoroughly, mount it. Yeah, so I've given this go on a mount. It's on this top piece, there are some new fans growing. This piece here has just started a new fan, and the actual existing fan looks okay. Don't worry about the size of this. This is an absolute miniature Neo, this one. It really is a genuine miniature. And then the piece down the bottom hasn't got any new fans, but the fan itself is just about growing. Incredibly slow grower, this one. I've never got this one to bloom, but it seems to be doing better on its mount than it ever did in a pot. So bonus. Let me go back up where you came from. That's the Neos done. If any of these plants look dry, don't worry, I'm doing all this before the time gets on. The sun hasn't hit the grow room yet, so it means that the kit isn't going to fire up. Or if it does, I'll have to turn it off, but at the moment I'm just pushing on. Right, this one's not so easy. The Miltonias that I got from the Eric Young Foundation via Burnham's, I don't hold Burnham's responsible, that were badly infected with Fusarium, and most of the roots were rotten, so they had a bad start in life. And of all the plants to give a bad start to, Miltoniopsis is not the one to choose. But I'll dig them out. They're easy to get at. And we didn't look at these that long ago, but we can have a look at them. I didn't put the labels with their names in the pots, I just put the colour on. So this is the yellow one, and the leaves that it had that were left, I took off some pieces, are okay. and we do have new growths. I've got a new growth here pushing up quite nicely, which is just starting some roots. There's another one on this one. Yeah, there's another one coming up in the middle here. So I've got two new growths on this plant. But what I'm more pleased about is I do have some root growth. Not much, but some. So it's slowly recovering its roots. This one's going to be okay. It may even bloom on one or both of those new growths because there's enough of a plant there to give it a base to work from. If I was working on a single bulb with a new growth, that new growth probably wouldn't bloom, and if it did, I'd stop it. I'd need to get the strength back in the plant. But there's enough of that plant for it to be strong enough to bloom if it chooses to do so. So that's the first one. And next. Ugh. There's a lot of bending going on here. Right, this is the pink one. I'll put pop-ups on this, you know, because the blooms were pretty spectacular, which was why I bought them in the first place. If I'd known what the plants were like, I wouldn't have done. Now, this one had so much rot around the base, I was dubious about leaving bulbs like this on, but they dried. So although they've still got the black marks, they're totally dry now, so they're okay. And the fact that that is now sitting on the media, not sitting in the media, they don't get wet. So I'm happy with that. And again, we've got a new growth coming up here. We've got another one here. There's another nice big one coming up in the middle there. So this one looks like it's got three. Yeah, this one's got three new growths. And again, it's a plant that's large enough to actually put up with blooming should it choose to do so. So not bad, I would say. This is the one that got the basket dropped on it, and it did quite a lot of kinking and bending of leaves. It even broke one of the flower spikes at the time. Still, we do have a little bit of root growth. I wouldn't say it's a lot by any means, but some is good, and certainly on the surface of the pot I can see roots starting, and they haven't pushed down far enough to see in the pot yet. But it's getting there. It's okay. It's going to make it, even though it looks a bit... This is the sort of damage that the basket did when it fell on it. It's just, you know, bent the leaves over. Some had to be cut off. So, coming on, that's the pink one. Now, if that was the yellow one and that was the pink one, this will be the one without a label, endearingly known as the other one. As I say, I couldn't be bothered to write the label out because the names are in French and I'd have had to look it up and spell it correctly and everything. Now again, this is a reasonable plant. We do have, on this one, a lot of root growth. So this one's pulling back quite nicely. And if you can see it, look where most of those roots are coming from. Hang on. Left and right. I know, Ita. You just sent a comment first thing this morning. Don't forget, camera left. Still difficult. So this little new growth here has pushed out a hell of a set of roots just from that one little new growth. So that's doing okay. I think this one's only got the one new growth at the moment. Oh no, there's another one coming up round here. There's another one coming up in that little, tucked in behind that leaf. That leaf is already, oh, where's my camera? You probably can't see it, but at the base of this growth that I'm holding, this bract leaf at the base is split, which means the new growth has got somewhere to get its roots out without me having to tear that off. Yeah, coming on. Actually, there's another new growth there pushing up. Yeah, and that's got a split at the base. So we've got new growths on this one. Again, the plant that was remained was okay. If either of those two new growths decide to bloom, they'll be allowed to. And yeah, this is the one with the best root growth at the moment. This one's pushing on quite nicely. So they have recovered. As far as the Fusarium is concerned, you have to bear in mind that giving a systemic fungicide treatment for Fusarium is never guaranteed. You should stop it. If you apply whatever stuff you've got in the appropriate manner that it says on the tin, so to speak. So in the case of this one, it was a treatment which involved a bare root soak overnight in the fungicide, followed by a massive soaking of the plant itself and then it was repotted, or the other way round, and then 10 days later that treatment was repeated. Now, it hasn't been repeated since. It might be a good idea to do it again now, because although, like I say, if it's not guaranteed, the idea is you stop it in the plant. You can't cure it as such, the damage is already done. But you can stop it spreading any more by killing it, which in theory means everything new that grows from that point is clean. But it can resurge. You know, as I said, if your treatment's not guaranteed, it pays to repeat again after a couple of months, you know. Certainly the one I've got, you're only allowed so many treatments a year, so you've got to go steady. Right, so that's the Miltonias from Eric Young Foundation. Well, this is a good one. Somebody asked to see their namesake, which is Miltonia Queen Anne. Well, it's one of two. And they were both got from a nursery in Madeira. There were 3. They all had Fusarium really bad, and one of them didn't even make it. It didn't even live. But the other 2 did. I'll get them down, but unfortunately, when I mounted them, they didn't get tags put on them, and I don't know which one's which. But one of them is Queen Anne. I think it's actually the smaller one, but I don't know for sure. But we'll have a look at them both. And this is a good point. This is a Miltonia, not a Miltoniopsis. There's quite a lot of words going on the Facebook group about the orange rot, and there's quite a nice post been put up there this morning that's some apparently authoritative information about the flipping stuff. But it is a rot, it's a bacterial infection, so your normal fungicides aren't going to touch it. In my opinion, that orange rot is preventable. It may or may not be curable, I'm not so sure. But why I wanted to point this out is don't get confused with Miltonias and Miltoniopsis. This Miltonia is getting very high light to get it to bloom. Look at the colour of the base of these leaves. It's an orangey yellow. That is not rot. That's what a Miltonia looks like when given high light. Yeah? So don't get the 2 plants confused. Have I got one handy? I've just put them all away, haven't I? Let's see if I can get one out. Right. There is a distinct difference. Right, let me just put that down a minute. This doesn't ring true across every single case, but when you look at a Miltoniopsis, the bulb has leaves down the side, normally 2, sometimes 4, yeah? But what it does have is a single leaf sticking out the top. And the leaves have a grey-green colour, yeah? They're not a bright green. So, single leaf sticking out the top, generally speaking. Then when you get to the Miltonias, they have a pair of leaves sticking out the top. So again, they have a number of leaves down the side, normally 2 proper leaves and 2 what I call brack leaves, because they're the leaves that enclose the new growth, and then when the new growth pushes out and forms its bulbs, they stay small. Yeah, but don't get the 2 plants confused. Miltonias like good light up near Cattleya type if you want them to bloom well, and they will discolour in that light. They will go pale. And often the base of the leaves, as you know with Oncidium types, the leaf is always in 2 sections, and as an old leaf dies and drops off, it'll break there, leaving that bit on. Yeah, so don't get the 2 mixed up. They are quite different. Miltoniopsis come from cloud forests. They are cool growers. Right, back to the rot. Let me just finish that off. This orange rot, being a bacterial infection, in my view, is caused, not caught. Yeah? If you're dealing with cool growers that like very high humidity, probably the most important factor, that's the one that's often neglected, is air flow. Really good air circulation. Without that, moisture can hang around, especially if you get your plants wet when you're watering. Water down in the, this is where the water gets when you're watering, down in these bits. There's my camera. Yeah, gets tucked in there. Yeah, well, with good air circulation and good movement, that's going to evaporate. It won't evaporate that quickly when it's cold, and it's not going to evaporate hardly at all if it's cold and there is no air circulation. It'll sit there, and it's a breeding ground for bacteria and nasties. Yeah, so Miltoniopsis, they need that airflow. That's what montane forests are all about. They're not still, they're moving air all the time. It's constantly being changed. They do get wet, you know, mist and fog and rain. The plants are getting soaking wet. They don't all get orange rot and die in the wild, do they? So we're doing something different, and the difference is usually that airflow. Prevention, better than cure any day. That orange rot, if you've got it, then I think the expression is cut it out quick. Anyway, back to the two Miltonias. One of these is Queen Anne. It could be this one. Have we got any? Oh, and this one has a spike starting just in there. So if this one is Queen Anne, we may get some blooms down the line. I don't think there's any more spikes. Oh, that's the old spike, so it did bloom last year. Oh, there's a spike on, yep, there's a spike on that bulb too. So this one has two spikes starting. Once the blooms come out, I'll know which one's which again. And as I said, the Queen Anne is a very attractive Miltonia, lovely deep purple colour with some yellow. And this is the other one, which I can't even remember the name of. Let's see if I can show you that if I tug it. This leaf is dying, it's on an old bulb. That break point I was on about, the leaf is splitting there, it's not ready to come off yet, but that's where they come off, on that little break line there. Yeah, so that's an old bulb anyway. Now this one lost a new growth a while back. There, it rotted. It wasn't orange rot, it was Roger going mad with the sprayer, and this plant had its back to the circulating fans. Rest my case. But it has got a new growth coming out of this end, so that's good. Any sign of spikes on this one? Don't think so. Not at the moment. That's already bloomed. That's already bloomed. That aborted its flower spike. I bashed it actually and I snapped it. Otherwise we'd have had a spike there. Is it going to try the other side? No. So at the moment this one hasn't got a spike on it. It will probably bloom on that latest new growth that side. The new growth this side hasn't started yet, but having lost its spike, it should push out a new growth again soon. It will come from down in here, this area somewhere, sort of thing. It's going to be off around the back of the mount soon. So yeah, don't get Miltonias and Miltoniopsis, you know, muddled up. And I'm hoping that the smaller one is Queen Anne, because that's got two spikes on it, whereas this one now has none. I mean, this was a beauty of a spike when it was coming on. Right, that's those two done. So I'm going to chuck them in the watering bowl. Just can't be bothered to put them back yet. Right, that's Miltonia Queen Anne done. Right, coffee time. It's getting cold. Too late. It is cold. Right. Somebody asked how the Miltonias that were deliberately potted in the smallest pot possible are actually doing. Well, this is the easiest one to get at because it's in bloom. It's right under my nose. Got any aphids on those blooms? No. Good. Right. This was three separate. No, we haven't. No. It's all right. I have got an eye out for bugs at the moment. They are getting about. That's the sort of root growth I would say is perfectly adequate, and at this point in time perfectly dry, which is not good. So the trouble is that the Orchiata bark when it's new doesn't wet very well, yeah, and because it's a tiny little pot, whatever roots you've got are going to use your moisture up fast. So this one literally dries twice as fast as most of my other pots. So if you go for that theory to get a pot full of roots like that, keep up with your watering. An oncidium, despite being in growth and producing blooms, will stay dry like that a couple of days and not die, and the blooms won't suffer. If you've got good humidity as well. Dry air and a dry pot's not a good idea. But this would be much happier if it stayed moist. But it won't go down if it doesn't for a short period of time. So it'll cope with it. But yeah, that was 3 individual plants crammed in one pot. So that's one. And each one of those new growths has now produced a spike. So pleased with that. Let's see if I can find another one. This is not going to be easy because of the spike that's on it. I'll see if I can get it out. Now this spike had aphids this morning. This one's had a spray. So the spike is rather long and waggles about, so this one's difficult. Right, this is my castanier, and it's just opening now. When it opens, it's not at its best colour. It needs about a week after opening, and then the colours really start to shout loud. But it's a very long spike, very long spike. Now, these have very large pseudobulbs, very large. This was potted in a pot that, you know, most people would say that pot's far too small. But look at the root growth. Never mind the algae, that's because it didn't go in its black cover pot quick enough. And some of this algae is starting to die. But once it's finished blooming and had a little bit of a rest, because it won't be doing anything, yeah, it will start a new growth, at which point I will probably move it to a larger pot. Hasn't been in this pot too long, so to repot this one, I would gently tease out some of the media, not all of it. This is not old media, and I'd give that a spray with hydrogen peroxide to kill that algae off, and then next time it will be straight back in its black pot. The algae won't form in the first place. But yet again, very large plant, absolute pot full of roots. It works, or it does for me in my environment. A plant that size with those size bulbs, most people would have put in a pot twice that size. I doubt if you'd have got any more roots. So the roots would have been far more spread out. Yeah, but it might have been able to stay in that larger pot longer. But it's far easier to overwater a plant and keep it soggy if the pot's too big. It's almost impossible if the pot's too small. So if you're heavy-handed with the watering, keep the pot small. So that's that one. That's looking good at the moment. That spike is a nuisance. Gets knocked every time I put my Vanders back. Right, most of the other small Oncidium types are at the back of shelves, so I can't really get at them. But that's a couple that were just at hand. Right, Oncidiums in small pots. Getting there. The list is going down. Some of these I might not be able to do. Somebody asked how my Masdevallia ignea is doing. Well, against all odds, quite honestly, it's probably my best Masdevallia. This is a cold grower. Shouldn't even really be alive in here. But yeah, this is growing new growths like it's going out of fashion. No sign of any flower spikes yet. They may come later. But the plant itself has almost doubled in size this year. I mean, you can tell the new growths on the Masdevallias, they're a paler colour. They deepen in colour as they age. So we can go round and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least a dozen, oh, and there's some just starting as well that I haven't counted. So at least a dozen new growths in the last 2 or 3 months when it's been at its warmest. But this sits about 9 inches away from one of those little 6-inch computer fans. It's actually in a draft. I would define that as a draft, although strictly speaking a blast of cool air on this is obviously doing it the world of good. Some plants that wouldn't be a good idea because you do get quite a cooling effect from a fan. Yeah, well, on some plants that would be the genuine article, a draft. A draft is a blast of air that's wrong. It's either too hot or too cold, mainly too cold. A draft on a Phalaenopsis spike with buds on is probably going to blast them. But circulating fans are there to move the air. not to try and lift the leaves out of the pot. So, you know, you just look at your plant. If your plant's bending over and the pot's lifting up in the force 8 gale, it's too strong. But this one loves it. As I say, the leaves on this are constantly moving, and it's doing okay against all odds. I'm sure if that moved back a foot or two from that fan, it would start to suffer. Right, so that's that one. Right, now we're getting to stuff that's not so easy. Somebody asked how the zygos were doing. Well, the simple answer to that, because I'm not going to get them all out, is not very well, but not dead yet. I seem to say that quite often about zygos, don't I? Not dead yet. Right, what else can I do? Dendrobium hercoglossum, how is that doing? It's doing okay, basically. It's one of the biggies. With the length of the canes, it tangles against absolutely everything as you get it down. Now this is a strange dendrobium because of its growth habits. I'll get back here somewhere. This is it. It's quite a large plant, obviously, and I did notice when I watered this, somewhere on this, right down here, we've actually got some buds. Yay! So we're going to get a few flowers. It does bloom at an odd time, now and again. There's a hell of a kiki growing here. It's actually a double kiki. It's a kiki with 2 growths. This does do kikis, so we do get plants for other people. Don't all shout at once. There's some more in a pot somewhere, which I'll add that one too. Now this one's getting to the state now where I will have to inspect it closely towards the end of the year to find the canes that are of no more use. They will be ones that bloomed, this blooms about May into June. They would have bloomed last year at that time, and this year they would have bloomed again on the nodes that didn't get used the year before. The chances of them blooming again now are quite slim, and they start to shrivel at that point. But this is what's unusual about this. Most people expect their new growths on dendrobiums to start in the spring, or late winter, early spring on the nobody types. Look when this one starts its new growths. Right in the middle of summer. And it does the roots at the same time. Yeah? Now, have I got to worry about these canes maturing before winter? No, because this hasn't got that type of seasonal growth. It's odd. It does grow weird. These new growths at the top of the plant, they will grow on this year in the growing season. They will slow down but carry on growing through the winter. They will grow all through next year and into the following winter before they reach their terminal leaf. They grow for a long time. They haven't got an annual growth period. I mean, these canes here are still growing. That's last year's new growth. And they're just, this lot here is last year's new growth. They're just getting enough weight now to start pulling them down. But they haven't finished growing yet. They will get longer. These down here have finished growing. Once they get pendulous like that and they've reached their final size, they will get a terminal leaf and they won't grow anymore. So all these down here are finished growing. These up here, this is next year's mass blooming, all this lot of green here, sticking out sideways now, and this lot up here will be for the year after. Some of these may bloom next spring, if they're large enough. So it's got a strange growth pattern. But this has always grown well for me. It's a very spread out spindly plant, that's sort of quite natural on it. And I've seen some people who've grown these that don't get the length in the canes. They actually get a tidier looking plant than mine, but a shorter cane is never going to produce as many blooms as a really long one. They're capable of blooming virtually the full length of the cane, normally over a 2-year period. So coming on well, this one. Plenty of new growths. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 new growths so far. It's still starting new growths down at the base. And those will grow on this year, through the winter, next year, on into the winter, and stop sometime after that. So, yeah, doing okay. I'll never get that back up there, will I? I can try. So that was an individual plant asked about. Somebody also asked how is my Lindley actually doing, because that was a new plant. Whoops, too high, touching the roof, come down a bit. And I can get at that one. In fact, I asked about both of them, not in this round of questions, but earlier. The aggregatum, now called Lindley, is doing okay, and what I'm very pleased about is that. It's pushed its roots right through the moss and attached on the bottom of the bark, and the roots are coming out the side. New growths on this are this one, and this one, and this new one that's relatively recently started. The new growth the other side aborted, which is really annoying because it's not been replaced by another one yet. So at the moment it's only growing in one direction, which is this way. It's not doing that way as well yet. But there's still time for it to push out more new growth this year. It's now got a perfectly good root system for the size of the plant. And the plant that I've got, the leaves have all remained healthy. They've all remained a nice deep green colour. If this one starts getting pale leaves, there's something wrong, because it doesn't really matter how much light this gets, the leaves stay dark and leathery and thick and plump. The pseudobulbs, however, get creases in them. They look like they're starting to shrivel. That's a new growth. That's what it's supposed to look like. So as they age, not too long, only a couple of months after, see the new growth down there hasn't got any crinkles, but the one above it has. That's what it's supposed to look like. So when you're resting this in the winter, yeah, this is the bit you've got to keep your eye on. It's not what it looks like today and start worrying. It's what it looked like as it went into winter. That's what you've got to try and maintain and not let it get much worse than that. And that's not easy to tell. Shriveling of canes that already look shriveled is difficult to spot. Yeah, so that's that one. And somebody else asked how the other one was doing, which was the Jenkins CI. That was the one that I had to rip off the mount. God, it's getting more and more difficult to get at stuff in here as it all grows and gets bigger, which is good. But this one got ripped off its mount unceremoniously, some older parts thrown away and replanted. So this is what Jenkins CI looks like now. It's a fair old plant. It's pushed out new growths in this area, a few in there, quite a few up here, quite a few out there, and none in that gap, which is a nuisance, which was the idea, was to get it to start growing from the middle again. But all the pieces have taken. I've still got new growths coming out in places, yeah, so it's still pushing new growths, and it will carry on doing that for a while yet. There's still a good couple of months of growing season. But again, you know, when you're looking at a bulb that looks like that, you think, oh goodness me, it's desiccated. No, it's not. That's what they're supposed to look like. And I had somebody had a little argument with me about Jenkins CI. I was told that's not a species, it's actually aggregatum variety Jenkins CI. And for once I dug my heels in and I said, no, it's flipping not. And the very fact that you've said aggregatum means you have something that is old and has long since been replaced, because aggregatum is accepted as a synonym by some, but it's now called Lindley, as it always should have been. And Jenkins CI is a totally separate species. Jenkins CI is half the size. The blooms are different. One has got a bilobed lip, the other one hasn't. And one of them, the spike comes out from the base of the cane, and on the other one, it comes out from halfway up. They're not the same plant. Totally different species. Grr. and I ended the conversation with, and I've got them both. Sometimes I dig my heels in, not often, especially as that was an incredibly knowledgeable person that's been growing about 50 years. But for once I didn't stand corrected, I stood my ground. Whoops, what am I treading on now? A bit of bark. Right, so that was Herco and those two dendrobiums. Right, I'll cut the video off now. I need to get the camera down because the next thing, last couple of things I need to point the camera at. So I'll be back. I'll get a new cup of coffee as well. Okay, sorry for the abrupt ending and sorry about the noise. It's much later in the day now, but when I offloaded the camera onto the computer, I had about an
hour and 3/4 of video. Nobody's going to sit through a video that long, so I'd cut this one off, and the rest of the clips will make up probably 2 more videos. Yay! And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.